29-year-old Marcus Williams stood at the Family Feud podium with his shoulders tense and his hands clasped tightly together, carrying the weight of 3 years of regret, missed opportunities, and the overwhelming fear that he had waited too long to try to be the father his 3-year-old son Jayden deserved. Marcus's presence on the show was itself a testament to complicated circumstances. He was here with Keisha Henderson, his ex-girlfriend and Jayden's mother, as part of their tentative attempt to build some kind of functional co-parenting relationship after 3 years of Marcus being essentially absent from their child's life. Standing at the adjacent podium, 26-year-old Keisha Henderson carried herself with the strength and wariness of a woman who had learned to be both mother and father to her son, while never quite giving up hope that Marcus might eventually step up to be the parent Jayden needed. Keisha's decision to include Marcus in their Family Feud team had been controversial among her family and friends, many of whom believed Marcus had forfeited his right to be part of Jayden's life when he disappeared during the most vulnerable period of their child's early development. When Steve Harvey asked the question that would cut to the heart of Marcus's deepest struggle and greatest fear, the response came from a place of raw honesty that surprised even Marcus himself. "What is something you most want to learn how to do?" "Be a good father," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I have a 3-year-old son, and I wasn't ready when he was born, so I ran. I've been trying to come back into his life, but I don't know how to be a dad. My own father wasn't around, so I don't have a model for what good fathering looks like. When I see Jayden now, he cries because I'm basically a stranger to him." The Family Feud studio fell into the kind of respectful silence that comes when 300 people simultaneously recognize they are witnessing someone's honest confession about one of the most difficult challenges facing modern families. This wasn't just a game show answer, it was a young father's admission that he had failed at the most important job he would ever have, spoken with the kind of vulnerability that suggested he genuinely wanted to learn how to do better. Steve Harvey felt his chest tighten with both sympathy and respect as he looked at Marcus, understanding immediately that this young man was facing one of the hardest battles any person can fight, the battle to overcome his own upbringing and become the parent he had never had. As someone who deeply valued family and understood the importance of fathers in children's lives, Steve could see both Marcus's pain and his potential for growth. "Let me take you back to how we got here." Marcus Williams had grown up in Detroit without a father, raised by his mother Denise and grandmother Ruby. His own father had left when Marcus was 2 and never returned. "Your daddy just wasn't ready to be a man," Denise would tell Marcus when he asked. "Some men aren't built for responsibility." Growing up without a father left Marcus with complicated feelings about fatherhood. He promised himself he'd be different, but had no practical model for effective parenting. Marcus met Keisha in 2018 at an automotive warehouse. When she became pregnant in early 2020, both were overwhelmed. Instead of rising to meet the challenge, Marcus gradually withdrew, working longer hours and avoiding conversations about their future. When Jayden was born in November 2020, Marcus felt completely overwhelmed holding his son. Looking at this tiny, vulnerable human being, Marcus was flooded with panic about his inadequacy and lack of preparation for fatherhood. Instead of working through his fears with Keisha's support, Marcus slowly distanced himself, convincing himself that Jayden would be better off without an unprepared father. By 6 months, Marcus's contact became sporadic and unreliable. For 2.5 years, Marcus lived with the weight of knowing he had a son he wasn't raising, and the turning point came 6 months ago when he encountered Keisha and Jayden at a grocery store, and seeing his son, now a walking, talking little boy who didn't recognize him, was devastating. "Mommy, who is that man?" Jayden had asked, looking at Marcus with wariness. "That's your daddy, baby," Keisha had said gently, her voice carrying both sadness and anger. "I want to try to be in his life." Marcus had told Keisha, "I know I've messed up, but I want to learn how to be his father." Keisha's response was cautious. "You can't just show up now and expect Jayden to accept you. If you want to be in his life, you have to prove you're serious about staying." The past 6 months had been difficult. Tentative contact, supervised visits, and Marcus's realization that effective fathering required skills he didn't possess, but would have to learn. Marcus's initial attempts at connecting with Jayden had been awkward and often unsuccessful. 3-year-old Jayden was naturally cautious around Marcus, often preferring his mother's comfort when Marcus was present, and Marcus didn't know how to engage with a toddler's interests, energy level, or communication style. "I don't understand what he wants when he's crying," Marcus had told Keisha after a particularly frustrating visit. "I try to play with him, but I don't know what games 3-year-olds like. I feel like I'm bothering him when I'm there." Keisha had tried to provide Marcus with guidance about basic parenting skills, how to read Jayden's cues, how to engage with a toddler's attention span, how to provide comfort when Jayden was upset. But it had become clear that Marcus needed more comprehensive support than she could provide, while also managing her own parenting responsibilities. The Family Feud opportunity had emerged from Keisha's workplace team-building initiative. Her marketing company had been selected to appear on the show, and Keisha had made the decision to invite Marcus to be part of their team, partly as a gesture of good faith about their co-parenting efforts, and partly because she thought the shared experience might help them find ways to work together more effectively. "Maybe if we do something positive together, it will help us figure out how to be better parents together," Keisha had told her mother when explaining her decision to include Marcus. "I'm not trying to get back together with him romantically, but Jayden deserves to have both his parents working toward the same goals." Marcus had been grateful for Keisha's invitation, but also nervous about appearing on television with someone who had witnessed his failures as a father and who had every right to be angry with him about his abandonment of their family responsibilities. During the flight from Detroit to Atlanta, Marcus had been thoughtful and anxious, understanding that his appearance on Family Feud represented more than just a game show opportunity. It was a public acknowledgement that he was trying to rebuild his relationship with his son and learn how to be the father he had failed to be during Jayden's early years. "Keisha," he had said, as their plane prepared for landing, "I know I don't deserve your patience, but I want you to know that I'm serious about learning how to be a good father to Jayden. I'm not just trying this for a few months until it gets hard again." Keisha had looked at Marcus with the kind of cautious hope that comes from wanting to believe someone can change while having been hurt too many times to trust easily. "Marcus, I want to believe that's true, but Jayden needs consistency, not just good intentions. If you're going to be his father, you have to be his father every day, not just when it's convenient or when you're feeling motivated." The Family Feud studios had been both exciting and intimidating for Marcus. The energy and enthusiasm of the television production had been fun and distracting, but he had also been aware that he was in an environment where personal stories often emerged in unexpected ways. During the team introductions, Marcus had presented himself with the honesty that his recovery and personal growth work had taught him was essential. "I'm Marcus Williams," he had said clearly. "I'm 29 years old, and I'm from Detroit. I'm here with Keisha and her family, and we're working together to co-parent our 3-year-old son Jayden. I'm learning how to be a better father than I was ready to be when he was born." The audience had responded with supportive but reserved applause, and Steve had immediately understood that Marcus's story represented something important about second chances and the challenges facing young fathers in America. "Marcus, that takes courage to admit publicly," Steve had said, his voice carrying genuine respect. "What's been the hardest part about learning to be a father?" Marcus had looked at Keisha, who had nodded encouragingly, then back at Steve. "The hardest part is that I missed so much of his early development, and now he doesn't really know me. When I try to pick him up or play with him, he gets scared because I'm essentially a stranger. I have to rebuild a relationship that should have been there from the beginning." Steve had been moved by Marcus's honesty and his apparent genuine desire to change his relationship with his son. The game had progressed with Marcus participating thoughtfully and demonstrating emotional maturity that suggested he was serious about his personal growth and his commitment to becoming a better father. The Williams/Henderson team was playing against a family from Texas, and both teams had been supportive of Marcus's efforts to rebuild his relationship with his son. During the second round, when Steve asked for things children need from their fathers, Marcus had buzzed in with consistency, earning a spot on the board and meaningful looks from both Steve and Keisha, who recognized that Marcus was speaking from his growing understanding of what he had failed to provide for Jayden. But it was during the fourth round that the moment arrived that would potentially change Marcus's approach to fatherhood forever. Steve had announced the survey question with his usual energy, not knowing that he was about to ask something that would allow Marcus to articulate his deepest struggle. What is something you most want to learn how to do? The question hung in the studio air, and for a 29-year-old man who had spent 3 years running from the most important responsibility of his life and the past 6 months, trying to figure out how to be present and effective as a father, the answer was both simple and profound. Marcus had stepped up to the microphone with the vulnerability that comes from understanding that some problems can't be solved alone, and that asking for help is a sign of strength rather than weakness. "Be a good father," Marcus had said, his voice carrying clearly across the studio. "I have a 3-year-old son, and I wasn't ready when he was born, so I ran. I've been trying to come back into his life, but I don't know how to be a dad. My own father wasn't around, so I don't have a model for what good fathering looks like. When I see Jayden now, he cries because I'm basically a stranger to him." The studio had fallen completely silent. This wasn't just a game show answer, it was a young father's honest assessment of his own failures and his genuine desire to learn how to do better, spoken with the kind of vulnerability that made everyone present understand they were witnessing something important about growth, accountability, and second chances. Steve Harvey slowly set down his index cards. Something in Marcus's tone, a combination of genuine remorse, sincere commitment to change, and desperate need for guidance, told him that this was a moment requiring more than standard game show response. "Marcus," Steve said gently, "that's one of the hardest things any man can admit. What made you decide you wanted to come back and try to be Jayden's father?" Marcus looked at Keisha, who was watching him with careful attention, then back at Steve. "I realized that my fear of being a bad father was actually making me a bad father. Running away because I was scared didn't protect Jayden from having an unreliable dad. It just made me the unreliable dad I was afraid of becoming. I want to learn how to be present, consistent, and emotionally available for my son." But what happened next was something that no one in the studio, not Marcus, not Keisha, not Steve himself, could have anticipated. From backstage emerged a man whose presence immediately changed the energy of the entire studio. Lil Rel Howery, the comedian and actor who had built his career partly on his honest discussions about single fatherhood and the challenges of raising children, walked onto the Family Feud stage with the confidence of someone who understood exactly why he needed to be there and what he needed to say. "Hold up," Lil Rel said, approaching Marcus with a warm but serious expression. "Did I just hear a young father say he doesn't know how to be a dad because his own father wasn't around?" Marcus stared at Lil Rel, immediately recognizing him, but struggling to understand why a major comedian and actor was addressing him on national television. "Mr. Howery," Marcus said, his voice filled with respect and confusion. Yes sir, that's exactly what I said." "Marcus," Lil Rel said, "I'm going to tell you something important. I'm a single father. I've been raising my kids largely on my own, and I had to learn everything about parenting through trial and error, through making mistakes, through asking for help from other people who knew more than I did." The audience was captivated, understanding that they were witnessing something special, a successful comedian and actor sharing his personal experience with someone who was struggling with the same challenges. "But here's what I learned," Lil Rel continued. "Being a good father isn't something you either know how to do or don't know how to do. It's something you learn by showing up consistently, by paying attention to your child's needs, by being willing to admit when you don't know something and asking for help." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as he listened to Lil Rel speak about fatherhood, with the kind of practical wisdom that he had been desperately seeking. "The fact that you're here, the fact that you're admitting your mistakes and asking for guidance, that tells me everything I need to know about whether you can become the father Jayden needs," Lil Rel said. "You can learn this, Marcus, but it requires commitment, consistency, and humility." What happened next was one of the most meaningful moments in Family Feud history. Lil Rel made an offer that addressed exactly what Marcus needed most. "Marcus," Lil Rel said, "I want to help you learn practical parenting skills. I'm going to connect you with a fatherhood program in Detroit that teaches men how to be effective fathers. But more than that, I want to be available to you as a mentor. You can call me when you have questions, when you're struggling, when you need advice about how to handle specific parenting challenges." Marcus's face showed disbelief and overwhelming gratitude as he processed what Lil Rel was offering him. "Are you serious?" Marcus asked. "You would do that for me?" "Marcus," Lil Rel replied, "every child deserves to have a father who's trying to be present and involved. The fact that you didn't have that model growing up doesn't mean you can't provide it for Jayden, but it does mean you need support and guidance from people who understand what effective fathering looks like." Keisha was crying openly, watching Marcus receive the kind of mentorship and support that she had hoped he would find but hadn't known how to provide herself. Steve Harvey then did something that would become one of the most moving moments in Family Feud history. He removed his suit jacket, his lucky jacket that he wore to every taping, and approached Marcus. "Marcus," Steve said, his voice thick with emotion, "this jacket has been with me for every show I've hosted, but today it belongs with someone who just proved that the most important thing a father can do is admit when he needs help and commit to learning how to be better." He placed the jacket around Marcus's shoulders. "You wear this to remember that fatherhood isn't about being perfect. It's about being present, and the fact that you're here trying to learn, trying to rebuild your relationship with your son, that tells me Jayden is going to have the father he deserves." Marcus pulled Lil Rel into a hug, then looked directly at Keisha, who was smiling through her tears. "Thank you for giving me this chance," Marcus said to Keisha. "I know I don't deserve your patience, but I promise I'm going to use this support to become the father Jayden needs." The studio erupted in applause that wasn't just appreciation for entertainment, but recognition of something profound about second chances, mentorship, and the importance of supporting fathers who are trying to break cycles of abandonment and neglect. What happened after the cameras stopped rolling became a story of sustained growth, practical learning, and the power of mentorship to transform family relationships. Lil Rel kept his promise, connecting Marcus with fatherhood resources in Detroit and maintaining regular contact to provide guidance and encouragement. Marcus enrolled in a comprehensive parenting program that taught him practical skills about child development, effective communication with toddlers, consistent discipline strategies, and emotional regulation techniques that helped him manage his own anxiety and fear about parenting. 6 months after his Family Feud appearance, Marcus was spending regular, consistent time with Jayden, had learned to read his son's cues and interests, and was building the kind of trusting relationship that allows children to feel safe and loved with both parents. The progress wasn't immediate or easy. Marcus had to learn patience with himself and with Jayden, understanding that rebuilding trust takes time and that effective parenting requires daily practice rather than occasional bursts of effort. But with Lil Rel's mentorship and the support of the fatherhood program, Marcus developed the skills and confidence he needed to be present and reliable for his son. 3 years later, Marcus and Keisha were successfully co-parenting Jayden, who now had strong, loving relationships with both his parents. Marcus had become an advocate for fatherhood programs in Detroit, sharing his story with other young fathers who were struggling with similar challenges and demonstrating that it's possible to learn effective parenting skills even without positive role models from childhood. The episode became one of the most watched and shared in Family Feud history, sparking conversations about fatherhood, the importance of mentorship for young fathers, and the possibility of breaking cycles of abandonment that affect many families. Fatherhood programs across the country reported increases in enrollment following Marcus's appearance, with many men crediting his example with inspiring them to seek support for their own parenting challenges. The lesson that Marcus taught that day extends far beyond parenting or family relationships. He reminded the world that admitting ignorance is the first step toward gaining knowledge, in that asking for help is a sign of strength rather than weakness, and that it's possible to learn essential life skills even as an adult when you're committed to growth and willing to accept guidance from people who have experience and wisdom to share. Steve Harvey learned that day that the most powerful moments in television happen when you celebrate not just success, but the courage to try again, to admit failure, and to commit to doing better regardless of past mistakes. Lil Rel learned that sharing his own experience with fatherhood could provide exactly the kind of guidance and encouragement that other fathers needed to succeed, and that mentorship creates connections that benefit both the mentor and the person being guided. Because that's what second chances look like when they're earned, not the absence of consequences, but the commitment to learn from mistakes and do the work necessary to become someone worthy of the trust and love that family relationships require. That's what fatherhood sounds like when it's learned rather than instinctive, not perfect parenting from the beginning, but consistent presence, genuine effort, and the humility to keep learning and growing as a parent and as a person.